Empower You has partnered with Americans for Prosperity on many, many things over the last 15 years. And we're so appreciative when they've worked with Empower You on liberty and limited government. Donovan O'Neil, this is your chance to meet him, is the state director for Americans for Prosperity, where he leads a team working to educate, activate, and mobilize individuals. Prior to joining the Stand Together community in 2016, he worked for Ohio Auditor Dave Yost, where he promoted local government innovation and advocating for cost savings initiatives in the state. Donovan is a graduate of Youngstown State University and lives in Mansfield. Let's give Donovan a round of applause. Thank you, Donovan.
Thank you so much. All right, is this working for us okay? Yeah, there we go, we're coming through. All right. Shouldn't need this, but just in case you folks ask me a question and try to stump me, I'll be ready to go. I'm used to having a microphone, so I don't know what to do with my hands, but I'm sure I'll figure it out. Thank you folks for letting me be here today. I'm a huge fan of Empower You. I'll tell you what, I'll tell you a little bit about myself here in just a moment, but in my role as state director with Americans for Prosperity, the 10 years I've spent working with Americans for Prosperity, I have had the opportunity to travel around the state of Ohio. I've had the opportunity to travel around the Midwest. I've had the opportunity to travel around the country. And I could tell you what, there is not an organization like Empower You anywhere else in the country, at least that I've found, that I've seen. And I get to go and speak with a lot of different conservative folks. I get to meet with a lot of different groups, and you folks are so blessed to have this organization and Dan. So the opportunity to come down here and talk with you all, it's been a couple years, I think, since I've been here last, but a big fan of what you all do and the fact that you folks get together, is it twice a week, all year long, and for a school year, most of the year, right? And you have the opportunity to learn something, to grow your knowledge, to empower yourself is phenomenal. And I wish we had something like this in many, many more parts of the state, but it's something special down here. So I'm glad to get to play a little part in it and talk to you folks here today. So my journey into activism began years ago. I was actually my parents would take me, and I got to go and hold up signs in support of pro-life movement on Elm Road in Warren, Ohio, from Northeast Ohio. I would do that and get honked at and say, well, this is kind of nice. I kind of like this. Being involved in something, having a cause. I joke, I tricked my parents. I was homeschooled. I tricked my parents into letting me go volunteer in 2004 at the Bush Cheney Victory Center. I got to go down and make phone calls, and I'd go out and knock doors. And as a 16-year-old young conservative Republican, you can imagine you're treated like a god. Like, people look at you and the Mountain Dew, the pizza, do you want to go meet this person? The opportunities are abundant, right? When you're a young conservative. And I said, well, I really like this too. This is nice, getting treated like a king. And I did everything there. And it sort of set me on this trajectory and this path, being homeschooled, getting involved in politics, issues that I cared about a lot, and got involved in college at Youngstown State University. Was involved in the Tea Party movement. Anybody involved in the Tea Party movement? Okay, Dan, we've got a few folks down here who remember what that was all about and were around for it way back when, but had the opportunity then to work for Auditor State Dave Yost, where in that role actually worked on some of the things we're going to talk about tonight here a little bit. And it's interesting now, having been with AFP for 10 years, how some of the stuff has sort of swung back around, and the things we were talking about doing in 2010, 11, and 12 to reform Ohio and get it back on track after a number of really bad years in the economic downturn, they're coming back again. And I think the reason because of what we didn't do then, when we had an opportunity, the problems we're facing now with the property tax crisis, the burdens of government, the inefficiencies, waste, and abuse in our government systems, not just in Washington, D.C., but in Columbus and even here in our local communities, because we didn't have the courage to do those things then, those problems have festered and lingered, and it's why we're experiencing a lot of the challenges we're facing today. So I've talked about this a few times. My hope here, folks, is it doesn't just become all doom and gloom. I was telling Dan earlier, I said, I've worked on this conversation, this presentation, this discussion a few different ways, and it always seems like the program ends in doom and gloom because there's some real challenges out there. But I've reworked it a little bit, and hopefully for this group, with a little bit of engagement, we won't all leave the room feeling worse off than when we came, but we'll actually have a little bit of hope and some ideas on ways we can make a difference. We'll see what happens. So for those of you not familiar with Americans for Prosperity, we're one of the nation's largest conservative grassroots advocacy organizations. We exist with full-time chapters, full-time staff in now 38 states. We just added an Idaho state chapter, believe it or not, today. When they open the Hawaii chapter, I plan to apply for whatever they'll pay me to do that job. But we actually have operations in all 50 states. Here in Ohio, we're one of the oldest chapters, not quite 20 years in existence, but we've been around for a while, and I've been honored to work with the organization, as I said, for 10 years. What we do, right, is we put a megaphone, as I like to say, we put a megaphone to the voices of Americans here in Ohio, Ohioans who want to make a difference in their community. In Ohio, we have our Buckeye Blueprint. I'll talk about that a little more towards the end of the program, but we work to engage and empower volunteers and coalition partners in all 88 counties to pursue emboldened policy champions and transformational public policy reform. Maybe some of you have been involved with us a time or two, or have been familiar with the organization in one way or another, and appreciate any, those of you who've volunteered your time, efforts, or been a part of a program that we've done, and thank you for being here tonight. So we're going to walk through about 4 main areas here that I want to talk about. And what a lot of this boils down to is we're going to start by talking about what government's role is, how we at Americans for Prosperity view government for the 4 key institutions. We're going to talk a little bit about some myth versus facts about government here in the state of Ohio, particularly focused tonight on local government, the political subdivisions that we all live in, know, and love. Talk a little bit as well about some reform efforts, as I mentioned, and many of you may be familiar with, who've been involved in grassroots organizing, conservative politics for a while here in Ohio. We've experienced these challenges for a while. The problems that we're seeing, from property taxes to red tape to housing and regulations, these things have been discussed and evaluated and reviewed in the past. We're going to bring some of that forward here tonight. And then finally, the part I added, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, is the blueprint. This is the hope, right? So we're not going to leave it with just here's where we failed a decade ago, some ideas for ways we can move the ball forward here. So our founder, Charles Koch, has talked about what government is. We view actually 4 key institutions. So we think about society in terms of 4 key institutions: business, education, community, and government. Business, education, community, and government. And what we mean by that, I'll define each of those a little bit. So by business, we're talking about entrepreneurship, delivering goods and services, making people's lives better. You may not, for all the ills and problems that the phone in your pocket, the computer in your pocket, and social media may bring upon society, there's a lot of good and opportunity that it's created, right? Business is designed, not just in that technological sense, right? But business is designed to improve people's lives. It is an important institution in society. Education is something like this, right? Or the building that we're in, right? We believe a key institution in society is education, not entirely in that brick and mortar, but what we do to enable every individual to realize their full potential, to have the opportunity to unlock their God-given talents, the reason they were put on this earth, right? As an institution, we believe that should exist and should be available to everybody to have a choice in the type of education and opportunities that they present themselves with. Community is what happens when government isn't there, right? And how bad is the institution of community these days, right? The fact that so much of what we do, we offshore to the government, right? You think about COVID world. Was it government agents coming to your house or delivering, food and medications to family members who might have been stuck, locked at home during the COVID lockdown? No, it was churches, it was communities, it was individuals in their community, right, being involved in making a difference. When the government shut us down, the community rose up and helped, right? Community is an important institution, and it's one that has grown incredibly malnourished and is underserved, and is an important, it's important in that it is marked by voluntary association, in complete contrast to government. Government, we believe is the fourth institution is important. It's the one that we at Americans for Prosperity work in most of the time in the work we do, but we believe it should be limited, right? We want it to be focused like our founding fathers envisioned, with the power to protect, not protect us from the government, right? Protect us from each other. So I can't take all those Eric Conroy shirts, even though I may want to, from you, right? Because that would be violating your rights, right? And government should step in and protect you from my desire to take all those Eric Conroy shirts. But often what we have, right, is a government that uses its power to restrict us, whether it's red tape and regulations, through taxation that takes money from our pockets and puts it into, reappropriates it somewhere else. Government often is used to restrict our abilities and our opportunities in this country. We want a government like that articulated in the Declaration of Independence, right? What goes on? What's after those three dots there? All people are created equal, endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. That's right. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what government should be enabling us to do, right? Or we believe by restricting government, not government restricting us, we should be able to do that. And that's the heart of our belief of government, right? Is that as it was articulated by our founding fathers, and it's the kind of reform and advocacy that we do in government. Because if we can limit that coercive nature of government back to its proper role and strengthen that institution of community, right? Where churches, organizations, nonprofits, individuals come together through voluntary association, we can get better results. It's a difference between this, right? A limited government and an unlimited government. So we do have a belief that there are places where government is warranted. And believe me, I'm not just lecturing you all on government, laying this as a foundation for what we're going to get into here in a few moments. So national defense, right? We want secure borders, and we want to be able to protect ourselves from those who would do us harm, or maybe who don't share our values, right? And our same belief that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We want to be able to protect persons and property. So I can't steal those Eric Conroy shirts. Preventing fraud and coercion, and providing some level of true public goods, right? In short, where coercion is necessary in place of voluntary association. But we need to limit that government in what we do. This is important. Government is not our identity. Government is not our identity. When we think about this conversation we're going to have tonight about local government, political subdivisions, often that conversation boils down to identity. Where did you go, ladies go to school? Where did you folks go to school? Okay. How would you identify where you're from? Your identity, community? Okay. But what we find, right, is a lot of folks identify themselves based on the school they went to, the community, the town that they live in, and in other words, the government that governs them, right? What we need to be careful with, though, is that government is not our identity, and too often in the local government discussion, the challenges we face in local government, we allow that entity, the mascots, the town, the village we may live in, to become our identity, and it could become a challenge. In short, we want a government that's limited in scope, accountable in spending, and responsive to citizens. We find that too often. As we well know, going to Washington, D.C. can be really difficult to accomplish these things. Going to Columbus, a little easier. Believe it or not, you could still go into the state house, go into your state senator's office, and have a conversation with them. Pretty easy to do. You can even go online and find out what they're spending in Columbus, where it's all going. Not too hard to find out. On the local level, much of this is available, but sometimes I think we allow proximity, right? Because we pass City Hall every day, or we go through a school zone in the school building, we feel that government, because we can see it and feel it every day, that it's actually close to us, when in reality, it fails to meet many of these tests of being limited in scope, accountable in spending, and responsive to our citizens. So I want to talk about that a little bit here tonight. We kind of go through this myth versus fact. So one of the things that we hear is we've gone out and we talked to folks about local government reform, the need to change the way that we deliver services here in the state of Ohio, is that, you'll go talk to a township trustee, school board official, a mayor somewhere, and they'll say, they do this a lot at the State House. They go down to Columbus and they testify on this a lot. They'll say, we're already lean and efficient. Anybody buy that myth? Maybe you talk to your councilman, been told that before? Anybody been told that? Yeah. You know, that's have what he thinks. Yeah. Well, the fact is, Ohio loves government. Sorry to tell you, folks, we love government. We've got, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, and depending on how they pull these numbers, that if you can look it up online, they change year to year, but 3,900 plus political subdivisions. The Auditor of State, currently Keith Faber, the Auditor of State audits over 5,900 political subdivisions in the state of Ohio. These are entities that receive some form of tax dollars in order to exist and provide a public good. That's 88 counties, 253 cities, 1,300 townships, 662 school districts, and over 952 special districts make up what the U.S. Census of Governments would look at. We love government almost as much as any other state in the union. A couple of years ago, we were only 5th. We're doing better. A couple of years ago, we were 5th most political subdivisions in the nation. I've been using that talking point up until about 48 hours ago when I pulled new numbers and discovered we're the 6th. So we're doing good. We're one less, but we're still in the company of states like Illinois, California, right? Isn't that baffling for the amount of population they have there? But let's compare ourselves to some other states in equal population, right? California is a large state. These places look a little bit different. You could take states that I often hear us talk about, right? Whether it's every good Buckeye moving to Florida at some point in their life, or some of these states like North Carolina and Georgia that are similar in population. You've got a state like Florida, right, with, what is it, about twice the population, I believe, of the state of Ohio. Half the amount of governments serving the people in the state. Use school buildings. Make sure I get the number right here. I pulled that up. Talked about Ohio having, was it 600 some? Ooh, saw that one. I will go back. Ohio has over 600 public school districts, right? Those are school districts, not buildings, districts that operate, each one of those with a superintendent, assistant superintendent, a treasurer, deputy treasurer, multiple administrative staff, all funded through a combination of property tax dollars, sales tax dollars, and your income tax dollars that go to Columbus and get redistributed back to the school districts. We have 611 districts serving 1.6 million students. The state of Florida, 67 school districts serving 2.8 million students. There's a contrast here, right, to be made with the amount of government that we have compared to other states of similar or greater population and what they're providing. North Carolina, 960, operating with 115 school districts serving 1.5 million students. Truly a comparable state to us in many ways, other than the sun, but give me a break. We love Ohio. We love Four Seasons, right? The myth number 2 that we hear a lot. Anybody hear this one before? More local governments mean better local control, right? Government closest to the people, right, is the idea. No? No? For those of you online, if your local officials listen. Well, what we find, right, is overlapping jurisdictions, multiple political subdivisions in close proximity ultimately result actually in duplicated services, higher costs, and less accountability in many ways, right? And Dan, not put you on the spot, but you did a video today talking about, that you shared in a story you shared with me about fire districts, right? How many? 6 within, 6 within 3 miles. 7 fire departments. Now, I shared with you our view of government, right? We do believe there's a role of government to plan our lives. I want fire department to show up if heaven forbid, my house is on fire. I want police to show up. Heaven forbid, you're in an accident or being mugged, right? I want good, safe roads. I want schools that my kids can go to. Should I choose to send them there? I like school choice, but if I choose to send them to a school, I want it to be a good school, right? But oftentimes, right, what we find, these school districts, I think, are one of the most blatant examples of this, right? We have 611 districts. That creates higher costs and more government when we could consolidate, we could do more. I'll talk about that here in a moment. I'll talk about this study as well, but what we found, right, is that shared services can provide opportunities to lower the cost to taxpayers, provide equal or better services when you streamline and specialize, as well as creating opportunities for again, that higher quality of service when you have those folks who are focused and specialized in what they do. Third one. So we've actually been cutting government in the state of Ohio. Maybe you've heard from a councilman or you've gone to your local school board and said, hey, look, my property taxes are out of control. I can't handle it anymore. And they said, well, look, we've already been cutting employment. Local employment has actually been rebounding. Now, it's not back to where it was in the 2010 recession, right? But it's climbing back up. Explains in a lot of ways why our property taxes are probably getting a little worse for wear. But maybe it's going back up because we're getting more people. Maybe that's why, right? More Ohioans, more people immigrating to Ohio means you're gonna need more folks to provide high quality services, right? What's that? Ohioans are leaving. We are growing a bit, but we're not growing as fast as many other states, and we're not growing in a way that would justify the amount of governments that we have, right? Consolidating services, subdivisions may hurt services. Any thoughts on that one? One of the things I hear, I've had folks tell me, if we like having the police dispatching right down the road here because they know the streets in our town. All right. A lot of people say that. Anybody else ever hear this one? The reality is that communities that share functions like dispatch and other services improve response times and save millions. Wood County, I believe, a couple hours north of here near Toledo, almost in Michigan. You go across the Maumee River there. The county sheriff does dispatching for 50 political entities, 50 entities. All those folks live in Wood County. All those folks have maps and technology that allow them to see and know community, right? But what are they doing there? Consolidating those services so that the many villages, townships, cities, and other political subdivisions within Wood County have the ability to focus on what they're good at, while the sheriff is able to focus on what he's good at, right? Providing those dispatching services. I think this was from a few years back, I think a little over 10 years ago now when this occurred, but Akron, Summit County Health Departments merged services. Take the city of Akron, merge it with Summit County Health Department, find over $1 million in savings. There's two things you can do with that money, right? If you're an elected official and you find $1 million in savings, what are the two things you could do? Well, okay, let's say you're not a corrupt official. It's one of you folks in this room is the elected official, and we're all good, honest citizens here. What are the two things they can do? Give it back to the taxpayers, or use it to provide a higher quality of service. I kind of want that money back right now, given how expensive everything is. But you have those options, right? Quality's still high. Services expected from the people are maintained. But what you're achieving, right, is you're eliminating redundancies, you're streamlining the services that people are paying precious taxpayer dollars for, and accomplishing better return on investment with those dollars. And this is one of the inherent challenges in government, right? I'm not a business guy. Dan is. There's probably many of you folks who have gone out, taken risks, created opportunity, jobs, and invested your money to get a return, right? My understanding in talking to entrepreneurs and business owners is they're continuously trying to find ways to find efficiencies in their business. Not because they're greedy, like our friends on the left might say, right? But because they want to provide a better quality service to their customers. There's a profit motive there, right? Better quality to their customers, more pay to their employees, an ability to reinvest in their business through through R&D, right? And in government, does that exist? Is there a profit motive or if they fail to deliver a quality service, if your police department fails to deliver a quality service, what happens to them? Nothing, but something bad will happen to you, right? There's no incentive there. Folks like Akron and Summit County, merging those health departments have helped out in many ways. Number 5, don't worry, there's only 50 of these. It won't go 2, and that was only 8. Make sure I'm mindful of time. So we've heard this one. Anybody heard this one before? Look, this is what I hear. You people in Columbus cut our local government fund, and now we're poor. And because we're poor, we're putting more taxes on our citizens, and they can't handle it. First, where does Columbus get its money from? Taxes and citizens, right? So it's all the same money. It's just, is it Columbus taking the money out of our pockets and redistributing it to mismanaged communities? Or are we actually locally managing these decisions? The reality is, and we could probably dive a lot deeper into this one, the whole presentation on property taxes alone here. If you haven't had one yet, there's plenty of great people to talk about it. The reality is property taxes here in the state of Ohio go up because of local decisions and valuations, right? Columbus collects 0 in property taxes, has 0 ability to levy property taxes on the citizens. They set the rules, and there are many things they're doing to reform that system right now, but they don't impose the property taxes. Your townships, your villages, those 3,900 political subdivisions, each one of those goes to you as voters and says, will you give us more money? Will you renew our levies? So what we've seen since 2010, when we started reforming the local government, property tax revenues increase. That only happens 2 ways, folks. Either the valuation of your home goes up and the unvoted inside millage costs you more, or you go up, and I say you, not looking at anyone in this room, but the voters allow their local government to increase their property taxes. In fact, everybody watched the election, you all saw the elections the other week, right? There are a record number of property tax levies pass here in the state of Ohio. Does anybody, but here's some inside baseball. Maybe you all know this. Anybody know what I'm going to get at here? The inside baseball of that turnout? Less than 25%. So what you had and what we have, there have been some efforts to reform this. I think there's more to be done. You have 20% turnout, 1/5 of the electorate turnout, and on a simple majority, they can increase your taxes. 1/5 of the voting population on a simple majority can vote to increase your taxes. Now, shame on the folks for not turning out to vote, regardless of how they're going to vote, right? The fact that you only have 1/5 of people turning out when you've got property tax issues and local elections that have a very tangible impact on all of our lives. But it doesn't take a lot of folks in a low turnout year to make that tax bill go up. And finally, state support to schools has increased. It's, well, there's only 2 places in the world where these kinds of crazy, where fiction can be reality: Hollywood and state capitals across the country, where you increase money for public schools, increase money for libraries, increase money going to government entities and line items, yet at the same time they say you're cutting us. Why do they say you're cutting us? Because we wanted this much and you're only giving us this much. One politician promised us this much and we're only going to get this much. It's bogus. State support schools has increased even as that LGF has declined. Well, I think I just actually covered this myth. Sorry, I kind of jumped ahead there a little bit. But we know that taxpayers asking for relief are often ignored. How many of you, I don't know, just show of hands or feel free to speak up. Anybody over the last few years as property taxes spiked, gone and talked to their township official, school board, or city council about that? What was the response from them, if you don't mind me asking? Yeah, they shift blame. It's not somebody else is the response he got. Anybody else go talk to their local government? Yeah, you, sir.
function on everybody's territory and elevating the total tax take into their pool and depriving other agencies of revenues. And the Tax Levy Review Committee was established and it put a lid on that for a while. They had to go through the Tax Levy Review Committee and be voted by the county commissioners before they could put it on the ballot. That fell apart when we ended up with a majority of Democrats on the county commission. And they blew all that to hell. And we've had this fantastic increase where one agency gets more money than the sheriff's department and the courts. It's the basics went to the back of the line, and the pet social engineering went to the front, where they're trafficking kids. And you heard about the Marcus Faisal disaster where the kid was killed and burned, and it wasn't him, it was the other 10 that the agency found out about that stopped the runaway levy revenues being imposed upon the county.
Sounds like an unconstrained government compared to that more constrained government that we'd want. You guys had it good. You had those constraints, those checks and balances in place where you could be heard, right? Where there was strong local oversight.
Yeah, and they fired all the competent people on the board and put in a bunch of toadies that shouldn't even show up. I mean, you know, put the rubber stamp out and give it to the commissioners.
Yeah. Well, and this is the one that gets me the most, to be honest with you. We'll go out and, you know, I'll talk to we'll be at a AFP chapter event or meeting with a group of our volunteers, and they'll say, you know, tired of property taxes. And I'll say, yeah, you know, it's the local government. They're like, well, you know, I like local government because it's close, right? It's close to the people, and it's a real conservative idea. It's just down the road. They're accessible. I can go to them if I've got a problem. I know who my trustee is. I can call him up. He'll pick up the phone and talk to me. But, and God love them, there's a lot of good folks in local government, right? There's a lot of good folks. Some of you might even be in this room here today, just waiting to get me when I leave the building. But you may not be the problem, right? But there are just as many more, right, who are ignoring their folks, right? They're saying it's Columbus's problem. It's Washington's problem. It's how the voters said we could take this money, and so we're going to just take it and keep going. And sorry that your home's costing a lot more. It's just the way things are, right? The reality is government, just because government is just down the road or within arm's reach, doesn't necessarily mean that it's accessible or responsive to the people. And going back to that number of political subdivisions, right? Big government can take a different form. It's not just this big monolithic stone building in Columbus or Washington, D.C., right? It can be the warm village hall that, despite smiling faces and the ability to go in there and see a government official face to face, there's no obligation necessary for them to move, right? There's no profit motive. There's no incentive for them to change the way that they do business. And local government isn't always good government, I guess is what I would say there, right? So I talked about identity. It's the reason we can't consolidate our schools, right? We don't want to consolidate our schools because, look, we're Mansfield Tigers where I live, and I'm certainly not gonna be a Lexington Minuteman. That's purple and yellow. We're black and orange, right? We're not doing that. They're weird down there. If you consolidate, we lose our identity. We're no longer the Tigers. We're now Minutemen. You laugh, but it's an argument that's made. It's made in your state house by officials, school board officials, and teachers unions. When the topic of conversation comes up in committee hearings in the halls of the state house, that we should consolidate services. We need to look at reforming the way we deliver the services to the people of the state of Ohio. The reality is, you could preserve identity while cutting costs, right? You could imagine a world where you've got a school district that's run in the county, right? But instead of having 6 different superintendents, 6 different deputy superintendents, 6 different treasurers, 6 different assistant treasurers, all making, and God bless them, we all want to make a good buck, right? I'm a I'm a capitalist. I believe people should make what they're worth and have the ability to go out and make money, right? But that's a lot of money right there. Many places, that's $400,000 in salary. And that's how do they get that salary? Where does that salary come from? Tax dollars, the people, us, right? And so you got to earn that money when it's coming out of my pocket, right? We can consolidate those into one administrative function, right? Still have the Tigers, the Minutemen, and whatever the people in Madison are. I really don't want to hang out with them, but you can have all of that, still have that local identity, but be smart about how you're delivering the services, smart about how you're providing the efficiencies in your government. Finally, maybe it means cutting frontline workers. I mentioned before, right? I want police to show up if my wife's in an accident and there's an emergency. I want the department to be there. Get stuck in a tree, or God forbid there's a fire in my home, right? But oftentimes, as I just talked about, it targets that bureaucratic overlap, right? That's what we want to be focused on. If we can be smarter with the tax dollars that we have, that scarce resource, our elected officials can be better stewards of it through shared services, consolidation, and ultimately bringing down the size and scope of government here in the state of Ohio. That could mean more police officers, right? That can mean more teachers. That can mean better pay for some of our teachers, right? Because we're not spending it on an administrator or a paper pusher. God bless them, we need those people too. But we can put that money in the hands of the folks who are actually on the front lines of service delivery in the government entities that we depend on. And government is not our identity, right? All right, any thoughts there? I could pause for a minute there. Appreciate the conversation. Any thoughts or anything I maybe didn't cover? Myths or things that you've heard? Or challenges. I welcome challenges to these concepts too. I'm not immune. I'm by far a singular expert. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Hold on, please, just a minute.
Oh yeah, for our online people.
Would you go 2 slides back, please? All right, oh, one more, one forward, there, stop. The goal is smarter government, not smaller services. I think I would have felt a whole lot better if you had started with that fact.
Okay.
Because that's the, in my opinion, the biggest bottom line, to be smarter.
Yeah.
Work smarter, not harder.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, that's what we elected. While Dan's going to the next person here, I mean, that's one of the things that we were looking for at the beginning of this Trump administration, right? In Washington, D.C., through the government efficiency programs and a lot of stuff they were talking about, is we got a lot of bureaucracy, and we're talking about Ohio here today, but we got a lot in D.C. That's what people want, is a smarter government. It's going to give them services at a lower cost. Yeah.
On one of the slides, it said LFG, and what was that?
Oh, yeah, LGF. That's a local government fund. And so for those of you who don't know what the local government fund is, the Cliff Notes version of it is the state has for years provided a portion of the general revenue fund. So the general revenue fund, right, is all the money that comes in through income tax, sales tax, commercial activities tax, and a number of other smaller taxes. That general revenue fund is used to pay for general government services in the state of Ohio. So your education, some of it goes to Medicaid, incarceration. But what they also have is a percentage of that general revenue fund. I think the number's 1.7% right now. Anybody know? It's not a significant number now. It used to be much higher, but a percentage of that general revenue fund gets automatically transferred to the local government fund, which gets distributed out to all of the political subdivisions in the state of Ohio. So your counties, your villages, your townships. And so, yeah, that's how that works. And that number has changed. And that's been one of the arguments is back in 2011, 2012, they cut that local government fund because we were in an economic downturn. The state was in a budget shortfall, and we needed to fill that hole. And local governments will say, well, you've never refilled the hole that was left for us and the LGF. It's a nonstop battle and constant clash. But like one representative from Southwest Ohio, who I was in a meeting with last week, said, you know, if you want those services on a local level, you need to have a plan and accountability and raise the money to get those services. The state has its responsibilities, and I'm paraphrasing now, the state has its responsibilities and the local governments have theirs. Just like we're accountable to, like the state is accountable to the citizens, the local governments should be accountable to their citizens as well. Sorry, you got me on a tangent, but the LGF, Local Government Fund. All right, we'll keep plugging along here. So talk a little bit about reform efforts. And as I mentioned, a key part has actually been in this time frame here was the last time we really had a conversation as a state. Some of you might not have been involved in politics. You probably were working in business, living a good life, chasing your kids at soccer games, and just paying your taxes like good, honest, hardworking American citizens do, dealing with an economic downturn of your own, and weren't really plugged in and paying attention. But when that economic downturn happened, local government employment naturally dropped, right? Because when the economy suffers, the government suffers, as it should, right? It's not getting as much money out of our pockets because we're not getting as much money into our pockets. And there were a lot of really good conversations. In particular, there were two reports that have started making their rounds again in Columbus. Lawmakers are taking a look at them. Think tanks are bringing them up. Anybody familiar with Greg Lawson, the Buckeye Institute?
Greg has been a frequent guest at Empower You.
I figured he probably had been here many times. This was actually one of his first reports. I'm a big fan of Greg and the work Buckeye Institute does, but I'll dive into that in a moment. I think it was actually Greg's first report he did when he joined the Buckeye Institute in 2011. The other was actually sort of, I wouldn't call it a blue ribbon commission report, but it's a really good report that was assembled, believe it or not, by Governor John Kasich in the early John Kasich years. There was the early John Kasich years, very early John Kasich years. This was a major priority for his administration, and there was a lot of energy like, from what I had been told, had not been seen before on this topic. And they put this Beyond Boundaries report together and had folks like Randy Cole. I don't know if Randy Cole would have ever come through here, but he's a Northeast Ohio guy who led the charge on this stuff on behalf of Governor Kasich at the time. The Joining Forces report really focused on a couple of things here that, we've already talked about the first point, but compensation costs. So one of the challenges we have in the state, right, and this is talked about in 2011, is coming back as a problem now in form of pensions. Our Ohio Police and Fire Pensions Fund is starting to have some serious problems. There's controversy in the teachers' pension fund, and who's going to pay for it is a big question. Right now, the employer on the pension side of things, the employer for a police and fire pension pays, I think it's 19% for fire and 23% for police. Who's the employer of the police and fire? And who pays the city? How does the city exist? The people, the taxpayer. So when they say employer share, that's us. Our share, we pay 23% of that pension. And again, God bless them. Law enforcement do important work. They put their bodies, their minds, their families through a lot of stress, providing the services they provide, right? But because we've failed to really recognize some of the compensation challenges, collective bargaining agreements, and other things that go into public employment, let alone public employment in a state that has the 6th most political subdivisions in the nation, that begins to be a problem. And unless we reconcile this pension problem now, it's going to be a really big problem later. Not just to the taxpayer, but imagine that police officer, right, who's promised a pension today, 30 years from now doesn't get it, despite doing his or her job. These have ripple effects. We saw the problem back in 2011. Joining Forces had some recommendations on how to solve it. Beyond Boundaries report. So this report identified a lot of the overlapping and duplicative services and highlighted many of the ways that the administrative costs increase through this. One of the major recommendations, this is what Randy and the team there in the case of administration we're going around talking about, was more collaboration, more shared services. At the time, I was actually in Northwest Ohio, knows Sheriff Vasilishin. Mark Vasilishin's his name, the sheriff who's consolidated a number of dispatching services within his department. The communities he would go to, they would realize the savings. It's not just up there. Butler County has done the same. Washington County, actually, this is still a topic of conversation. Washington County over in Marietta, Eastern Ohio, is looking at doing similar. But it also recommended various cooperative purchasing and planning to help cut costs. Now, one of the downsides we had seen in this was we did do some regionalization. You've probably heard of councils of government, ESCs, education service centers have grown in popularity. Talk about that another time. But a lot of what we, I think, found over the last few years, I believe, is we had regionalization occur, but the problem was they didn't actually eliminate doing some of this stuff on the local level or make the necessary changes at the local level. They just added another layer on top. So we got to be accountable. We got to make sure we hold the folks accountable to this stuff. But also, where I used to work at the state auditor's office, they've done a lot under Auditor Keith Faber and the Ohio performance team. And so there's actually a team of government officials who are trained and whose job is to actually go out and provide performance audits, just like you might in a government if you'd have like Ernst & Young or some, business efficiency outside expert come in. They'll go in to governments across the state. They do it to state agencies as well, which is what this dashboard shows, and they provide them recommendations. Now, one of the challenges was when I worked for the state auditor, I would go out and I would actually sell these performance audits. I'd go to cities, I'd go to villages and schools and counties, and I'd say, hey, we've got this performance team. You folks, we've been hearing that you folks are experiencing revenue issues and service delivery challenges. Our performance team can come in and help, and they would bring them in. But here's the problem. We do the study, they get the recommendations, they talk about in a private meeting how important these things are, and yeah, if we could do this, it'd be great, and yeah, maybe we can outsource this service, or we'll move, we'll let the sheriff take care of our dispatching, or we'll have the county engineer do the roads instead of trying to maintain our own roads department because it's a lot of money and that equipment isn't cheap. But then they'd go out in public, and what would they do? They didn't want to do it. They didn't want to upset employees, right? Or they didn't want to ruffle the feathers of the community. It was easier to just say, hey, look, they cut our local government funds. That's why we got to raise your taxes, right? But the nice thing is, I promised no doom and gloom towards the end here, right? The nice thing here is, and I just discovered this the other day, the state agencies that are getting these audits, they're actually going through line regulations that have actually been implemented by the state agencies getting these audits. So on the state level, at least, there's some data to reinforce that when the auditor's team goes into one of the DeWine administration's agencies, does this evaluation, does this performance tune-up, gives them recommendations on ways to improve services and streamline efficiencies, there's some level of accountability back that you folks can go find. So you can go to Auditor State's website and look at it. One of the reports that we did back when I worked there, I think this was 2014, 2015. I realize I'm standing. Yeah, so what we did was a capital equipment utilization study in Lake County. So all the way up in Lake County, at that time, Auditor State Dave Yost and the performance team got all of those entities, pretty much every political subdivision in Lake County, to agree to allow us to open the books and take a look at their equipment utilization. And so, we looked at engineer departments, streets departments, and they inventoried all the equipment that they could, and the utilization of that equipment. And the performance team provided some recommendations on ways that we could increase shared services using Lake County as sort of a beta test or an example of what this could be. What we found, 3 to 36% of available hours is used, and there's a lot of equipment duplicated across political subdivisions many times. As you can see, right, you've got villages within townships. right? You've got small political subdivisions, and so there's overlap, a lot of overlap we found. We also found there was a lot of poor tracking. As you can imagine, a lot of these political subdivisions are still pretty small. They're not necessarily up on technology, and it's not their fault, right? And if they probably wanted to, they'd have to charge us more tax dollars, and I don't know, give and take there, right? But a lot of the equipment didn't even have data, and so we don't even know what we're dealing with. And this is just in one small county with, what was that, 8, 16, about 24 political subdivisions. But there was potential that through the equipment sharing, and I was actually part of those conversations with those political subdivisions, talking through with the engineers what it would take to get shared service agreements set up between all of them, so that if one community needed a dump truck, they could work it out to have that happen, instead of when your dump truck broke and you needed to buy a new one, you had to go to council and spend $200,000, $100,000 for a vehicle, right? You could instead go down to Kirtland Hills Village, and they've got that nice new dump truck, and we'll go ahead and use that. I don't think this all, but the sad story here is, I think some of those agreements are probably still in place. I haven't been up there. It's probably 10, 12 years ago now since I was involved in this. I don't think much happened from it. We built a database, shareohio.gov, that provided an opportunity for people to post their equipment, probably a little ahead of its time, but you could post the equipment that you have if you were a political subdivision and offer to share it to increase that utilization or generate revenue for your community. All kind of fell apart. The challenge becomes fiefdoms. Everybody doesn't want to give to the guy next to him, guy or gal next to him, right? Because why would Wickliffe want to share with Willowick? Well, maybe we will, right? If we're feeling like it. It's not, there's no animosity, it's not evil, it's not mean, it's just, there's no profit motive, right? Where's the incentive for Willowick and Wickliffe to come together to save their taxpayers any money? Because the money's still flowing in. That's why reform stalled. I forgot I had this slide. That's why reform stalled, right? Basically, there's no incentive. The economy started to come back post-economic collapse. Tax revenues started coming back in. Folks weathered the storm, laid off a few employees, made a couple changes on the margins, but, all in all, things were fine. Here's also why things have stalled and why they don't get better today, even in a moment when so many Ohioans are facing a property tax crisis. So we talked about the number of governments, but this is the number of people who work in those governments, just in the elected official space. Now, big disclaimer here, some rough numbers, right? Some cities will have more council members, 7, some might be on the lower end. So there's some averages, some ranges here. But one of the things that I've said for a while is, you think about it, when you have 3,900 political subdivisions, each one of them represented by 3 to 5 to 7 members, elected officials, that's literally tens of thousands of paid lobbyists, not in an evil, dirty way, but their job, right, is to maintain the status quo, to protect the status quo for their community. So anytime your state representative, your state senator wants to make a change or reform the way we do government here in the state of Ohio, that's the brick wall they run up against. This is just the elected officials, folks. We're not even talking about the union stewards, right? The police chief, the fire chief, the road superintendent, the engineer, the administrator, the deputy administrator, the treasurer, let alone their family, right? If we're talking about taking 6 school districts and consolidating them into one administrative function, where 5 superintendents out of 6 might not have a job in the county that they had before. Yeah, but, but you think their family likes that? How motivated do you think those folks are to pick up the phone and call their state rep and say, hey, I don't like that bill. Don't do that to us. It's not evil, right? It's not inherently wrong. It's self-serving in the most natural of ways, but it's a brick wall, right? This is the challenge. This is why the reform doesn't happen, folks. Tens of thousands of paid lobbyists who represent the thousands of political subdivisions of the state of Ohio, the 6th most political subdivisions in the nation, this is the brick wall we run against for reform. This is why Randy Cole failed. This is why Greg Lawson, as great as he is yelling at a brick wall for joining forces. We've got to change it. It's got to change. And that's why we've got our Buckeye Blueprint. That's why we at AFP exist, right? Because where those folks have a natural affinity to go out and make a difference or defend the status quo, we've got a passion to make a difference. A few years ago, we started our Buckeye Blueprint. That's our plan to build a bolder, better Buckeye State. It sounds like, Dan, I'm sliding right into a sales pitch here, but there's a reason I'm kind of talking about it in this way, because this is the exciting opportunity you have. What we didn't have 10 years ago was an opportunity for grassroots to take action. We didn't have an opportunity for people across the state of Ohio to come together and get involved in this process. And I think what we're seeing, what I'm seeing at least, as I travel the state on behalf of this organization and meet with different groups and talk to people around the Buckeye State, the property tax crisis has woken people up to the problem out there, right? To the point where they want to eliminate property taxes outright. They want to get a petition filled, file this thing, and go eliminate property taxes. They are motivated like you've never seen them before.
Is it going to happen?
I don't know. I don't know. They gotta, well, if it does happen, here's the problem. They're going to tax us somewhere else. That's why this message that I'm talking about here, I think, is important, and where we're focused on a lot of our energy is, how do we actually reform government here in the state of Ohio? Because you can take that revenue source away, but until you actually dissolve those governments or force some action in terms of that entity existing, that money's coming from somewhere else. So our Buckeye Blueprint's made up of engaged communities, empowered coalitions, emboldening policy champions to advance transformational public policy reform. What we do, right? And I think why we can make these changes happen, why reforming local government, reforming government here in the state of Ohio is a major priority for us in our Buckeye Blueprint over the next 2 years, is because we have the opportunity to actually do these things with this strategy. What we know won't work, right, is maintaining the status quo. What we know won't work is looking to Columbus to solve these problems. But what can work, right, is embracing this idea of consolidation, shared services on a local level. Did you know today you could go, I'm not telling you to go do this, right? But today, if you live in a village, you could actually go file paperwork to dissolve that village, to eliminate a government in the state of Ohio. It's as easy as that. But who wants to actually be the pariah in their community, knocking on their neighbor's door, saying, get rid of our local government? I'm wrapping up here, folks. We pushed to 8:30. I don't think I'd get it. I thought I'd be done a lot faster, but it was good chatting with y'all. I don't think I got enough material. But no, what we want folks to do, right, what we're going to be working on here at Americans for Prosperity, this mission, is to protect rights, challenge those myths that are out there, push back against those narratives that they're driving, the status quo fighters are driving, push for bold reform and change, learn and lead, and ultimately, like I say, we got to be bold. We're working to embolden policy champions, right? We want to, it's not that the elected officials, can't say this about all of them, but most of them, right? The folks we hang out with, it's not that they lack the courage or the desire to make change happen. It's that they're humans too, and they need us to back them up. We can't sit back and complain. We got to be engaged. I know all the folks here in this room are. So join us, and together we can move Ohio from middle of the Midwest to #1 of the nation. Thank you, folks, for letting me talk about this. And Dan, thanks for having me here tonight.
Time for a couple quick, we have time for a couple quick comments.
So I kind of feel like we have the ideas and the argument on our side. I think it's pretty hard to argue against these types of facts. But I think it's a money problem. I think it's a money problem. And I feel, and I'm gonna sound like a shill, but I think people, I just started supporting your group in a small way, and a couple other organizations too. Just, $25 a month. Don't just write one check. do something every month, sign up for automatic, because, groups like AFP and Buckeye Institute, and there's Heartland Institute is amazing on,
Yeah.
environmental stuff. They're trying to get a bill through in Ohio. They just testified in Ohio to try to get some of the energy craziness stuff, out of the state of Ohio's laws. But we need to support organizations with, I think organizations like AFP can really punch way above their weight. And because, all you have to do, if you just follow the money and take your local rep, take your state senator, look where they're getting their money from. And you're going to see why sometimes you scratch your head. Why'd they vote that way? Why aren't they supporting this? And then you see where their money's coming from. Like the OEA, Ohio Education Association, they got their money spread all over Ohio. And so I think I think the research is needed. It's great, but we got to give a little bit of money to some of these organizations, that are fighting for us. And second, real quick question, Vivek Ramaswamy, if he is our governor, is it possible he could institute sort of a Doge type operation and maybe change some of this stuff from the state down?
Yeah. Well, and thank you for that comment and the support you give to our organization. It means a lot. It lets us do the work that we do and with the team that we have. But I'll actually say this: your money, the financial contribution is incredibly helpful. The time contribution is what we need, right? Taking a couple hours and going up to Columbus and sitting in a committee room or testifying or joining us for a meeting with a state rep or coming out to a coffee and luncheon with one of our county chapters. That's where the power is, right? And makes the difference. But thank you though for that.
Question right here.
Well, I want to, but real quick on Vivek too. Yes, I think that's part of what I believe can happen. His top tier issues are our top tier issues, right? And I don't think we've had a governor or the opportunity to have a governor like him ever before in history. I mean, you don't have the free state of Florida because Ron DeSantis was locking down the state, has talked about increasing taxes, and is just thoroughly mediocre, right? You have the free state of Florida because Ron DeSantis talks about slashing taxes, keeping business open, and attracting people to the state. And I think Vivek, for the first time, not a knock on any of Ohio's many, many great governors, but I think Vivek is going to be a different kind of governor for Ohio, and the kind that's actually going to move us in that bold, transformational way, should Ohio decide to elect him.
Yeah, Donovan, question about the organization itself, AFP. We talked tonight, or you talked about mostly the state and local, which is the topic. But as the previous gentleman said, it all comes down to money. And a lot of the money, of course, flows from the federal government down to the state. Mandates come from the federal to state. What is AFP's kind of organizational structure? Do you spend any of your time on federal issues? Is it 50-50, 30-70? What's the relationship with your federal strategies?
Yeah, I think it varies. We dialed in at the beginning of this year, and starting last year, we identified the fiscal cliff. We recognized that regardless of Republican or Democrat control in Washington, we were approaching a fiscal cliff, which was that our national debt is soaring and out of control. The 2017 Trump middle-class tax cuts were set to expire, and we needed to make sure those tax cuts were made permanent. And so from the beginning of this year, then, we started a grassroots movement pushing members of Congress, Senator Moreno, Senator Husted, to support that 2017 tax cuts, ultimately the one big beautiful bill, now known as the middle-class working family tax cuts. And so we work on those issues. Permitting reform's next up on the agenda. We think now that they've got the economy and the tax policy locked in, what we really need to see happen to supercharge America is the permitting reform and energy abundance here in the country.
Last question right here.
Several points. One, I think that there's too many people that are spending more time studying their sports instead of the politics. Two, too many people don't vote. Three, attend your meetings the trustee meetings, the whatever meeting you can make. And I know that a lot of them they purposely put the time when most people can't get to them. Okay. Speak up in those meetings. I mean, a lot of times I'm there and I'll be quite plain about it. I'm there to show them that somebody is watching them.
100%. One of the things I would do when I was a trainer, so prior to being this role, I was a Midwest trainer and would go around the country training grassroots advocates. We had a watchdog training program we would do, and it was to equip folks on open records, public records laws, to be able to go into the meetings and know how to find that information. I'll tell you what, with news media the way it is today, not just the problems that are on face value there, but the fact that there is no local news anymore, right, Dan?
Right.
The citizens being in those committee meetings, in those trustee meetings, that matters for somebody to have accountability and oversight over our local government, especially when we have the 6th most in the nation.
Let's thank Donovan for coming down from Mansfield. Thank you so much. What a
Dan.
great
Thank you.
presentation. So after that crafted presentation, Donovan, I think the question is, why are our property taxes so high? I think the answer you taught us was that it's our own fault.
Yeah, in many ways, but we can change that.
We can change that. Thank you. Thanks again to Donovan. Let's give him one more round of applause.
Was that?